Thank you, Easy. So let me start with the paradigm shift that's taking place in pharma today. The future is not about the large players having an advantage with deeper R&D budgets over the small ones, but rather an agile ones having an advantage over the slow and software having an advantage over biology. The pharma's purpose statements have been clear and consistent. We want better health outcomes and we improve patient lives. To stay true to this purpose, the focus has been on molecule innovation. The industry has done exceedingly well in terms of the molecule innovation. As you know, the average drug approval rate by US FDA increased to 45 in the past 5 years, only from about 29 for the 10 years prior to this, with orphan drug innovation and approvals following the same exciting rising trend. Has commercial kept pace, or is it falling behind the clinical innovation and the last mile execution to deliver the desired patient outcomes? The data clearly suggests that the commercial has not kept up with the pace of the R&D innovation. Over 40% of the products launched in missed their revenue forecast by over 20%. So there's a huge disparity between the clinical and the commercial excellence. On one hand, there has been a rapid adoption of digital transformation initiatives, which of course has been accelerated with the COVID pandemic. But when we look at the success of these initiatives, a bigger story of failure unfolds. 90% of the organizations have attempted digital transformation with over $700 billion of spend in 2020 alone, with little success to show for. Over 70% of these initiatives fail, and the remaining 30% that succeed struggle to sustain the gains over time. It's worrisome as the digital transformation spend projected to reach $3.5 trillion by 2028, and with the same unacceptable success rates of 30%, it means a wastage of over $2.5 trillion. So then the question becomes, why are we seeing such failures? Is it lack of strategy and vision? In our conversations with the pharma customers' leadership, it seems to be very clear and consistent in terms of the outcomes they expect, in terms of agile innovation, omnichannel customer excellence, and being able to provide personalized care. So the vision and the strategy aligns well with these outcomes. They also understand that building blocks that will be needed to get there in terms of data, cloud software, AI, ML, and the end-to-end business integration. So where is the problem? What we realize is that it is also evident from a recent survey we did with 26 of our customers that these initiatives have not been thought through in a holistic manner. And at times, it has been a case of putting the cart before the horse. The trending technologies like machine learning, AI, cloud, omnichannel has been the driving force behind these initiatives. Instead of truly delivering the purpose and improving patient outcomes, the biggest challenge are legacy mindset and the culture. The focus solely on just incremental changes is not going to work. Most of these initiatives are implemented in a siloed organization design with ad hoc systems and technologies, and the workforce that is not trained to be ready for the future. Net, digital transformation of today is failing even the traditional pharma business today. How will we be ready for the future that's going to be much more complex and challenging, which is coming down the pike? So there are two major trends that are going on to make it even more difficult for the pharma to succeed in the future. The first, the business model is evolving rapidly, and the focus on preventive, personalized care, precision interventions, curative therapies, digital therapeutics is increasing. the day of the patient segment of one is not far. The second is the pharma needs to play within an even more complex competitive environment of 5Ps, where the leverage of all the stakeholders is constantly increasing. The provider is closer to the patient's needs beyond the pill support from the pharma in improving patient lives. Patient is much more informed, empowered with technology, and used to a personalized experience delivered to them by companies in other industries. The payer is sitting on vast amounts of data, of claims, of patient data, giving them the insights that will drive value and contain healthcare costs. They want to provide the best outcomes at the lowest cost. The policymakers want quick results and continue to increase pricing and regulatory pressures. So the pharma has to roll up their sleeves. To succeed in the future, the pharma must operate with a new mindset, and we call it digital transruption. So there are some areas that need transformation, while others need to be disrupted. In pharma, there is a preference for incremental improvements, even when the foundation of these traditional approaches is weak. Such areas have to be disrupted. If you look at the example of Tesla, Tesla would not have been possible if it were built with the incremental mindset of what traditional car companies tried. They didn't come in and saying, we're going to have electric car, we're going to replace the fuel tank with a battery and the gearbox and the engine with a motor. They really thought through the new customer experience to the point where saying, why do we even need drivers? So the digital transruption framework answers 5 fundamental questions before kicking off any transformation initiative. First, does this improve the patient outcomes? Second, does this result in improved customer experience? Third, does this lead to a more effective and intelligent last mile execution? And fourth, does this work for the future patient segment of one? And the most important of all is whether it is possible to track and measure the impact and outcomes across all these areas. So unless the answer to all these foundational questions is clear, the initiative should not be kicked off. The biggest reason for high failure rate is the inability to track and measure the impact of these 5 initiatives. To start with, it is critical that the leaders assess their current state of digitization and plan for the digital transruption initiatives accordingly. Because if you're either too early or too late, the chances of failure become very high. Implementing advanced technology without foundational elements can be extremely expensive, but unfortunately, it's rampant in our industry. So the question is, are you ready to crawl, walk, run, and fly? Do you have the ability to capture and process data, have integrated software and processes in place to leverage artificial intelligence and deliver customer experience and outcomes to a patient segment of one? Most of the customers we work with today lie in the crawl and the walk bucket. The patient segment of one may sound futuristic right now, but pharma must begin with the end in mind to be able to not just survive, but thrive in the future, which is going to be driven by data, software, and artificial intelligence. Thank you very much.
Thanks for your presentation, Jassi. You spoke about software and AI replacing biology and chemistry. Have you seen this implemented in a pharma company? Are there any companies that are, really driving this trend forward?
Absolutely, Matt. Actually, there are a lot of very exciting innovation happening in our industry. And one company that has come to the top of the driving the digital innovation, which also is saving the mankind, is Moderna. And if you look at Moderna, they define themselves as a software company that does biology. And they've really thought through the whole drug development and the chemistry, the biology, all being done with data and software. And and that's what has enabled them to basically drive very, very fast innovation, going from getting the DNA of the virus to actually having the chemistry ready in the labs in less than 40 days. And those are some of the examples of what we are seeing, where the software is complementing or replacing biology and chemistry.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think that's a really interesting example because Moderna is a younger company, and so there's the ability to build that foundation in the way that we now know it should be built. For a pharma company or people listening who are a bit more established, big pharma, for example, what would be some of your tips for trying to rebuild that foundation in a way that has worked for Moderna?
Yeah. So man, most of the innovation in most of the industries are actually driven by smaller emerging companies who reimagine a business workflow, and that is what Moderna has done. But eventually, and we see these examples being driven in other industries as well, particularly auto manufacturing. So Moderna is the Tesla of this industry, and they're going back and reimagining the complete drug development and clinical development programs. And essentially what they did is that they wanted to have a vision which was a completely integrated ecosystem where all the data is shared, all the systems are interconnected, and they're seamless. So, the challenge that the traditional pharma has is not the vision and the outcomes of driving patient outcomes in a holistic manner. I think everyone has that. Is the execution, is the traditional organization design and structure of their organizations, which is siloed, with actually the software and IT being done by one group. The business, the commercial folks don't think of their jobs to be driving the software. They are relying on their IT to basically do it for them. So the pharma has to really reimagine how the business processes are going to work with software. And that is what is going to enable them to modernize their workflows to compete with the companies like Moderna.
You also spoke about in your presentation that patient segment of one.
Yeah.
What can pharma learn from other industries that are doing this customer segment of one and customer experience in general, or are doing it well, I should say? And can you provide a little bit of detail around that, please?
Yeah. So man, actually, this is an excellent question, and it's in some ways it's what the patients are demanding from us, because all the patients, or most of them, are also the consumers of the digital technologies that they consume in everyday life. So whether you're a customer of a Netflix or a customer of Amazon or a customer of a Google or a customer of Apple, these customers are getting a experience by these providers, which is a customer segment of one. No two people's Amazon web page looks the same. And yet we continue to basically segment our patient population, our physician population in large segments and treat them the same. And now what is happening is that with so much other innovation happening in the clinical field in terms of the new therapies, the gene sequencing and things like that, as the treatments are becoming smaller, to catering to smaller customer segments, we have to really reimagine how we're going to basically treat the patient as a segment of one. And if our systems and processes are capable of actually managing the patient of one, well, it's going to be easier to do it with the patient segments of 10, 100, 1,000 or so on, as compared to struggling with what we have done traditionally, which is a patient population of thousands, and struggling to basically then treat them as a patient segment of one.
I have a couple of questions here from the audience. They're asking about that term you used in your presentation, digital transruption. Can you talk a little bit about that and what you mean and why you feel it's important in today's environment to be disruptive?
Yeah, absolutely, man. So I think everyone is familiar with the word transformation, and everyone is actually familiar with the word disruption, right? And yet, most of the conversations that are happening in the pharma world today is about digital transformation. And there people are talking about how do we actually automate our processes, how do we actually engage with customers through omni-channel, how it's going to be driven by data and analytics and cloud software, and all that is great. However, if we were to only do the transformation without really disrupting our org structures, our processes, and the way we think about our business, our efforts are going to be just incremental of what we already have been doing for many years. So you have to go back and actually really look at it. How do I disrupt myself? Maybe how we engage with our physician segments needs to be completely thought through again before we embark on the journey of digital transformation. So when you combine that transformation with the disruption is that transruption.
And as I was listening to your presentation, I was really interested by some of your comments around last mile execution.
Yeah.
As you work with customers, what do you see, on the ground as reality? Is digital transformation having an impact on that last mile execution?
Yeah. So Matt, what we are seeing in the customers is that they have not really thought through the last mile execution as well as they should have. They have looked at the complete value chain, and they're looking at this thing as they're almost thinking incrementally, saying, I'm doing this process, how do I automate it? I'm doing this process, how do I automate it? If you go back to looking at some of the rules that I was talking about, the 5 rules, does this improve the patient outcome? Does it improve the customer experience? Does it make our processes more intelligent? And actually, do they really make a difference in the last mile execution? So if you look at traditionally the area of using data and analytics, I mean, our industry, pharma spends billions of dollars on buying and collecting data. And yet, when you look at the application of that in terms of using analytics in business planning for that, they actually just scratch the surface. And most of it is actually done at the planning stage and not it. If you look at the granularity of the data and analytics and you look at how much of that is actually going at the last point of customer engagement, whether it's a patient or a physician, there is very little of data and analytics being used at that last layer. That is the last point, the last mile, which the pharma has traditionally not done very well.
Thanks, Jassi. We have maybe about a minute left before our next presentation comes in. So I want to ask you very quickly, 5 years from now, leading pharma companies when it comes to digital transruption, what are they doing right now to make that first or second step on that journey?
So I think 5 years from now, we're probably going to see very similar trends to what we have seen in the auto industry, where companies like Tesla came out of the ground, and then 5 years or 7 years later, the traditional car manufacturers are really getting their act together. However, what you realize is that what the key differentiation is not going to be only the molecule, which is what has been the key focus of the pharma for so many years. It is actually going to be data. And when you look at the difference in of Tesla versus all the other companies combined, it's very simple. They have more data than all the competitors put together times a few times. They use software analytics, AI ML to basically drive algorithms that can actually build very smart cars, and that delivers great customer experience. 5 years from now, the pharma companies that actually think of them as a software company, which actually is dedicated to improving the lives of the patients, and they think through the complete business process and automate their business to drive great patient outcome and a great customer experience, are going to be the companies that are going to become the giants in our space.
Awesome. Again, Jassi, thank you so much for joining me today. Coming up next, we have Deborah Waterhouse, who is the CEO of ViiV Healthcare, and she's been interviewed by her colleague, Dr. Kimberly Smith, Head of Research and Development at ViiV, and they're going to be discussing the importance of diversity and inclusion in the workplace. Thanks again, Jassi.
Thank you, man. Enjoy the conference.